My name is John Charles Ranek. I go by John C. Ranek, as my father's name was also John Ranek. My parents were John and Louise Ranek. We grew up on a farm, and I was their first child, and I was born at home on a farm west of Tyndall, South Dakota. And my, uh, I married my wife in June of 1997.
57.
No, in 57. And we have 5 children. The oldest is Father Jerome Ranek. He lives in Vermillion, South Dakota now. Then James Ranek, who lives in Council Bluffs, Iowa. And then Julianne Ranek Stoltz, who lives in Wisconsin. And Janelle Ranek, who lives in Minneapolis. And Jason Ranek, who lives in Norway.
So, the first thing you can begin telling me is, what is your first memory?
I try to think what was my first memory, but I guess I was probably about 6 years old, 6 or 7 years old. And all once my dad says, "You want to go play with Alan Locknitz?" And he's a neighbor, but I've never gone over there to play before. But I said, sure. So he took me over there to play with this guy. And in a little while he came back and got me and took me home. He said, "You have a new baby sister." And that's my first memory.
Wow. So, your parents, they were named Louise and John Ranek. What do you remember about them from when you were a child?
Well, they were very hard workers. And on the farm, they would work together. And in fact, at harvest time, you had to pull a binder with a tractor, and Mom would drive the tractor, and Dad would be on the binder. And I was old enough to take care of my sister and do the cooking while they were in the field. And Mom would tell me just when to put wood in the stove and start the stove and put it on and everything. And then I'd get to go out and put a blanket in the field and take my sister. She was a baby then.
Wow, so it was a wood-burning stove.
It was a wood-burning stove. We didn't have gas or electric stoves. We didn't have electricity.
Wow.
When I was little, we used kerosene lamps when we used, and you'd put mantles on a big lamp, and that'd give good bright light, a lot brighter than just a lamp with a wick in it.
Wow.
And so that was called kerosene lamps. And so.
So how old were you when you were taking care of your sister and cooking dinner?
Well, I was about 7 or 8 years old.
So what are the biggest differences from living on the farm then and living in life today?
Well, everything was very modern. There was, you got electricity, you got computers. You never had computers. And we didn't even have a telephone till when I was home. And it's like night and day, different from then. You didn't travel very much, and you didn't get news on the radio. I remember during World War II, you'd have to go to a movie theater, and they'd have movie reels of the war, the pictures of that, but they'd probably be 2 or 3 weeks old.
Wow.
After it's happened. You'd probably listen to the radio and get some news that way, but you didn't have any pictures or anything. And I was about 7 years old when they bombed Pearl Harbor,
Wow.
and I remember that. And I was still going to the town school because where we had lived on the first farm, the school was closed, so I went to town school, and I had all of about 18 classmates. And then my dad was bringing me home, and that was my second grade, and I was changing schools at the end of December, going to a country school because we moved to a different farm, and there was a school that was a mile and a half away that I would go to. And I was worried that my dad would have to go to war,
Oh.
and because the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, but since he was a farmer, that was required as a important job, and he had to produce food, so he didn't have to go.
Well, that was very lucky.
But during the war, we just listened to the radio and see what was happening. And an uncle of mine he was in the army in the Pacific after there was wars with the East Coast and Germany, and on the West Coast was Japan.
Wow. So you said that you wouldn't travel a lot, and you didn't really have news or radio or anything.
Well, the cars, you didn't have the cars like we have today. They had, the first car that my parents had was a Model A, about a 1928 Model A.
Wow.
So, and probably the fastest it would go, probably about 40, 50 mile an hour.
Wow. What was the speed limit in the town? Was there a speed limit?
I don't think there were speed limits at that time, and there was no age limit. I think I first took a car to town when I was 12 years old.
Oh, wow.
And had to go get some groceries. And there were no driver's licenses when I grew up.
Wow.
And then they started to think you needed to have something, so you'd pay 50 cents to get a permit, a driving permit.
At what age?
Well, I think that was 16 or so you could get it.
Wow. That's very different.
But I knew how to drive because I was driving tractors on the farm, all the time.
How early did you start driving tractors?
Oh gosh, I can remember I was about 5th grade. I think I'd take a team of horses with a mower and mow hay with a team of horses.
Wow.
And I was too little to harness the horses, to throw the harness on the horses, so my dad would harness the horses, and then I'd take them out and mow the hay or alfalfa. And I was probably 4th or 5th grade when I did that.
Wow.
And then I'd rake sometimes, and one time I was raking with a team of horses and had a runaway. And as an old style dump rake where you'd have to push a lever to dump whatever he was raking was coming along with 2 wheels on either side, and you had a real high seat to sit on that. And part of the bridle came off of one of the horses, and it could see the rake that spooked them, and they started running. And they started going across the hay meadow, which has had badger holes in it, and the brake had hit a badger hole, and he bounced up. I was holding on to the seat with one hand and the reins with the other.
Oh,
and
so you were sitting on the rake while they were running.
And I was holding on to the seat from falling off in the reins of the horses, and the rake would keep dumping and hitting my hand, and I ended up, I had a bloody hand afterwards. But then they went across that, and then they made a sharp turn, and the rake hit a steel post and bent that and the fence, and started to go for home. Well, if they went to go home, they had to cross a railroad track, and there were 2 gates with great big posts that were about a foot thick, and I knew if the rake would hit one of those, it'd just throw me off. And I was getting ready to jump off if I could, but then I was able to get the horses to go in a circle. And
Wow.
my father was working in another part of the field, and he kept running trying to catch them, and couldn't catch them. And finally, when I got him to go in a circle, he's able to catch up with them and then grab the horses by the bits, the front of their mouth, and get them stopped.
Wow. That's pretty crazy. Wow. So you talked about how little there like you had compared to now. What did you do for entertainment? Like you and your siblings or your parents?
My entertainment was to get the chores done early so I could come in and listen to the radio to the Lone Ranger and some programs like that for children. And
what kind of programs were they?
well, Lone Ranger was a cowboy, and he was a popular cowboy and get criminals and catch people and so on. And
So it was like a radio drama?
yeah,
Wow.
radio. You didn't have television till I was in college, so
Right. So you would sit and listen to that after your chores.
they'd give me I'd have to feed the chickens and I'd feed the hogs, and when I was older, I helped milk the cows.
Wow.
And milk by hand at that time, you know. You just sit on the stool by the cow and milk, have a bucket between your legs and milk the milk into the bucket.
Wow. How long did it take for you to finish all of your chores?
Oh, it'd probably take 45 minutes, an hour or so. And if you're milking, it'd probably take an hour and a half.
Okay, so you did this after school?
Yeah, it was after school or during the summertime.
Oh, okay.
And when I went to country school, there was only four. I went to country school in second grade, and there were three others in my class. And then we moved to another farm, and I went to another country school, and I was the only one in my class.
Oh.
And one year I was the only boy in class, in the school.
Oh, wow.
There were probably only about 8 or 10 students.
But did they have teachers working there, or were the teachers traveling around?
No, it was one teacher.
Okay.
And the teacher to teach in a country school only had to go one summer to college.
Wow.
And then could teach in a country school.
Oh my goodness.
My mother did that as well, and she went through high school. She was very brilliant and went through high school in 3 years, and then went to what they call normal school, I guess, is for a summer. And then she could teach, and she was teaching in a country school, and she had one student that was older than she was because he'd failed so many grades.
Wow.
So
that's incredible.
But I had a teacher. The school was 2.5 miles away, and I usually ride my bike until winter time.
What did you do in the winter?
Well, the teacher happened to live up the road from us and had a car, so I'd ride with her to school.
Oh, only in the winter?
In the winter, and then you'd have to carry wood in and start the fire in a wood stove. And
really? Before class started?
yeah, they have a warm schoolhouse, and they had an outdoor toilet. Was the only thing you had, one toilet outdoor.
Wow. So did you have different classes like math, biology?
Well, you had, and you'd listen to all the classes when they'd call your class up, and you could listen to the first graders, you could listen to the 8th graders, or
wow.
all their lessons while you had studying, because you're just one room.
Oh. How many children were there in the whole school?
Well, probably there's about 10.
Wow.
And then their school was so small, they combined with another country school.
Mhm.
And so when we combined in my 8th grade, there was one girl in my class.
Oh wow.
So,
That's crazy.
so through about these 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, I was the only boy, only one in my class.
Wow. So you would have a lesson and then you would work by yourselves and then someone else would have a lesson and they would.
You'd have workbooks, they called them workbooks, and you'd work at your desk while there's other classes were going on, you know, they'd go, if there was, I don't think there was all 8 classes, they probably skipped some, but they'd start out with the 1st grade, and then the 2nd grade, and the 3rd grade, and the 4th grade, and then they'd start over in another subject and go through.
Wow. So are there any other memories that you would like to talk about from your childhood on the farm?
Well, I was a lot of times, summertime, I'd ride my bike to school, the 2.5 miles. And then probably about 7th grade, I started selling fireworks at a stand
Oh.
and I was the only one in the county one year.
Mhm.
I had a jobber would bring me the fireworks and I'd sell them and I'd get a percentage and he'd pick up what was left after the 4th of July.
Wow.
And when I started, you could start early, so I'd sell them the whole month of July.
Wow.
Fire, and I started in our garage in the yard and put a couple planks on some barrels, and then Dad had a kind of a little shed that he moved down. We lived along Highway 50, and he moved it down by the highway, and I cut out part of the side of the shed and made a folding down door so I could have a shelf there.
Oh.
And I made displays of the fireworks that I had on cardboard, one of each that I had on the cardboard so they could pick out what they wanted. And I'd have the stock in there, we were 2.5 miles from town. They couldn't sell fireworks in town, and kids would ride their bikes out to buy fireworks.
Oh, you couldn't sell fireworks in town?
No.
Oh, it wasn't legal?
It wasn't legal, still can't.
Oh.
And so I was the only person selling fireworks in the county.
Wow.
And have people come and stop along the highway, and I'd probably make close to $1,000
Oh my goodness,
So-
that was a lot at that
a
time.
whole month. But the state passed a law while I was selling fireworks
Mhm.
that limited the type of fireworks that you could sell, and you could only sell for 1 week.
Okay, so that changed your income.
It changed what you could sell. Some fireworks were so very powerful, they were called TNTs. They were about 1 inch long and probably 1/2 inch thick with a wick out the side.
Okay.
And they'd go off underwater.
Wow.
And one friend came back once and said, well, they told me to go off underwater, so I said, well, let's try it in a stock tank. We had a stock tank that was probably about 10 feet across and anchored by 3 posts on there to hold it in place, and about half full of water. And I lit one of those, and it went off in there, and that whole tank with the water raised about 6 inches off of the ground.
Wow.
And then the water all started to turn black, and my father said, oh, there's something wrong with the water. I need to send a sample to the college to find out what's wrong. So I had to tell him that I did. He wouldn't believe me. So he said, well, so he had a 55-gallon wooden barrel sitting there full of water. He said, throw one in there. I said, it's going to blow it to pieces. He said, well, I don't want that barrel anyway. So I did, and it just blew it to pieces.
Wow, so that was like dynamite.
Yeah, but you could sell that for fireworks. And I had a neighbor that was a bachelor, wasn't married. He'd bought a gross of those. A gross is 144. And I said, why are you using those? And he took them, he said he's fished with them as illegal. He had a lake, creek going through his place. He'd throw it in the water in the lake and it'd stun the fish and they'd float to the top and he'd pick them up.
Oh, wow. But those chemicals, then they would flow down in the creek.
Well, there's no chemical, it'd just blow up. There'd be nothing left on the fire grid.
Wow. Yeah, and that wasn't legal.
But on his farm, he was doing it. Nobody knew it. So.
Wow. So was that your first job?
Well, that's what I did. I sold fireworks from about the 8th grade through my second year of college. So about 8 to 10 years, I sold fireworks.
Wow.
So.
Tell me about Tyndall, and there are quite a few Czechs in Tyndall, weren't there?
I guess there were. You don't stop to think of their ethnic grouping.
Right.
But there's mostly a lot of Czechs, and I know when I was small, the first farm probably about 5 years old, we had a neighbor that couldn't speak English. He just spoke Bohemian, and my dad could speak Bohemian, and they'd talk together across the fence by a field or something, and I remember telling my dad, why don't you talk plain so I can understand what you're saying.
That's funny. So, but did you have any Czech traditions or in your family? Was the Czech heritage kind of preserved in any way?
My mother wasn't Czech.
Right.
And so she didn't know Czech at all, and so she made some of the Czech dishes, kolaches, basically, as I remember.
Did you learn that from your dad's family?
I really didn't know. My one set of grandparents, my mother's parents, died in the flu epidemic of 1917, and she was 7 years old.
Oh, really?
When her parents died. That would have been my grandparents.
Wow.
When my mother was 7 years old.
Right.
And then my other grandmother died when I was in first grade.
Oh.
In Yankton.
Okay.
And then my grandfather, I didn't get to really know. He was living elsewhere, and then he was living with one of his sons who was a bachelor when I was in high school.
So he wasn't living in Tyndall?
No, it was on a farm outside of Tyndall.
Oh, and you didn't go to visit often?
We'd see him every now and then. And when I went to high school, initiation for the freshmen, the boys had to dress as a girl.
Really?
And so when I dressed as a girl, that was part of the initiation. And afterwards, we went over to visit my grandfather and my uncle. And my grandfather thought I was a real girl. He's hard to see, and he opened the doors for me.
But he was Czech.
Yeah.
Okay, I see. But he spoke English well. Did he have an accent or anything?
I never really visited with him too much. He immigrated from Czechoslovakia.
Right.
So.
Okay, I see. So, but he spoke Czech to your dad.
Yeah. He could speak English. He learned how to speak English. So.
Oh, okay, I see. Okay, well, so you have told me some about your elementary school, but you said for your initiation at high school you had to dress as a girl. Was there any reason for that?
Well, that was, initiation they call it, Don't they have initiation in Norway when you start a school or something? But
no, not really.
and so I talked some about my grade school, I went to 4 different schools.
Wow.
My grade school.
Okay, so for 2 farm schools and 1 town school, and then.
Well, there was a town school. Oh no, I guess it was just, we went to town and then went Roosevelt School, it was called, or Dunwoody School and then Roosevelt School. These were the names of the schools, 3 different schools
Oh, okay.
I went to. And the country schools were, the first one, no, it was 3. I went to one when I was in 2nd grade. I don't remember the name of that school. That was one country school. Then I went to Dunwoody. That's the 3rd school, and then Roosevelt was the 4th school I went to in my
Okay.
8th grades.
Okay. And
So-
are there anything? Is there anything you would like to tell about those schools other than what you've told?
Well, when the first one was country school, where I was from 2nd to 4th grade, for recess, our hobby was killing snakes. It was infested with snakes in school grounds.
Really?
One recess, I think we killed about 8 snakes
Oh my goodness! How did you kill the snakes?
with a baseball bat.
Wow.
And we'd play baseball with all the kids, you know, in the winter time we'd play in the basement and with a rubber ball and try to stay away from getting hit from the person that was
Wow.
trying to hit you. In the winter time too, we'd go out and play fox and goose.
Oh, what is that?
When you had a snowfall, you'd make a big circle like a wagon wheel with the spokes, and the center was base. And then if you were on base, you were safe, but somebody was in with a snowball, and if you get off of that, you know, you'd want to get off and tease them, then they'd chase you and throw. And if he hit you with a snowball, then you were it.
Oh. That's fun. So, what was the name of your high school?
High school was Tyndall High School. Well, I had to have a car to get to high school, so we bought a 1929 Model A coupe. I think we paid $150 for it.
Wow.
And I drove that to high school. And there were probably 28 in my class, close to 100 in the whole school. And so I took the normal classes, and we had assigned seats, and it was alphabetical, and there's a girl that was either behind me or ahead of me all through high school, has recently moved to Sioux Falls. Her husband just died. She lives a little ways away from us, so we see her at church every once in a while.
Oh.
But high school was pretty normal. I didn't go out to sports because I couldn't. I had a kidney removed when I was 12 years old, so.
Oh, really?
And so I was not supposed to farm or play football or anything by the doctor's orders
Wow, so you couldn't do farming?
because the equipment was so rough at that time. You didn't have easy riding, and it was very rough on tractors, it bouncing hard on you.
Okay.
So anyway, so I didn't go out for sports, and my folks said, you gotta take some music. And so I signed up for band, and band's instructor said, what do you play? I said, I don't know. He said, I need clarinets. So folks bought me a $50 clarinet, and
Wow.
I learned to play that through high school. And then I took debate and oratory, and I went to a contest in Pierre, which is about 4-hour drive from Tyndall, and when it was on there, we had a snowstorm, and so it was over, but the roads were open, and there were snow cuts through the banks that were as high as the car, like a tunnel going through there.
Oh my
But the
goodness.
teacher had me drive her car when we went to Pierre.
What kind of contest?
It was a debate contest.
Oh.
So
Did you win?
I don't remember.
Oh.
So anyway, but outside of that, it's just normal high school. I carried my lunch always at noon, and we'd have a place to eat down in the cafeteria, but they didn't serve meals. You just brought your sack lunches
Oh.
and ate that way. And it was a one building. They had grade schools in the same building, first to eighth grade, and high school was at one end. And I took shop and agriculture there, and I was president of our FFA club, which is called Future Farmers of America.
Wow.
And I went to national convention in Kansas City my junior year, and went down there as a national convention.
Wow.
And since I had a project, I was called a State Star Farmer.
Really?
I got an award for that. I had a pet pig that I was raising and called the pig Cutie.
Oh.
And it grew to be about 800 pounds. And I could go out to the yard and call Cutie, and he'd come over to me. And, so.
But did that pig become a meal?
It did, yes, eventually.
Oh, okay.
Several meals for 800 pounds.
Yeah.
So, anyway, and then we'd always have go to a gathering of FFA students at the South Dakota State University once a year. And
Oh.
I'd go up there, and I liked the school, so when I graduated, I just went there. You didn't have to apply or anything, you just show up and register.
Really? So you did agriculture in college?
I took agriculture economics.
Wow.
And so,
But you got grades and everything in college?
yeah,
Okay. So you didn't have to apply, you just showed up and registered, and if you passed the courses, you went on, and if you didn't, you kind of
right,
failed.
right.
Wow.
And come to register for my sophomore year, they say, what's your major? Well, I hadn't decided on a major, so that's what I said, agriculture economics. And so, and then heard a fellows talk about wanting summer help, and that was my junior year. And so I signed up and ended up the agency that I went with. I signed up to work for the summer.
Wow. Which agency?
As South Dakota was Agriculture Statistics Service. And I was assigned to go to St. Paul, Minnesota office in St. Paul for the summer. So on Memorial Day, I had a little 48 Chevy, and I drove to St. Paul, Minneapolis, St. Paul, found a room to stay in, and just a bedroom in a home, and worked there.
Oh.
And after about a week of sitting in that bedroom, and there's no air conditioning those days, and it was very hot that summer. It was over 100 degrees several times. I was bored, and I saw an ad for people to sell cookware and cutlery to single working girls. So I answered the ad, and they hired me to do in the evenings, and they gave me cases that were big cases, a whole set of cookware and such, and about 3 big cases. And I couldn't get them into this small bedroom I'd rented. I had to set them beside the bed and walk on the cases to get to the bed.
Oh.
So I looked around and found a big bedroom in another home and moved. And so I'd have to buy little gifts and call the girl or or I'd make a demonstration and then say, I got a gift for you, you know, and it'd be some little trinket or something, or what I call it, free gift if you let me make a demonstration. And so I sold cookware and made enough money to live on and save my salary for college.
Wow. So, and you made quite a bit to pay off for college that summer.
Well, I graduated, I had no debt. I had at one time 4 jobs in college.
Wow.
Was working, and so when I graduated, there's no debt. I had paid for it, but all 4 years cost less about $3,000
Wow.
for college. So
So you met grandma in college. Can you tell me about that?
yeah, well, I lived in a after for junior and senior year. I lived in a upstairs of a house where there were 10 guys in this upstairs in 1, 2, 3, 4 rooms and 1 bathroom.
Oh, wow.
And we lived there, and so one of my roommates worked at the cafeteria in the Union building, and I was supposed to pick him up at 7 o'clock when he got off to go to a basketball game. Well, it was 29 below zero that night, and another friend lived in the country, and he was coming to the game. He says, well, my car will be warm, I can pick you up, and you won't have to warm your car up to pick him up. So he did, and he parked in front of the Union, and I ran in to get my roommate, he was in the lounge waiting for me. As 1 minute after 7, I was late, and he had run into a mutual girlfriend that was in a Newman club with us.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeannie was visiting this girlfriend. So I was introduced to her at 1 minute after 7. And they wanted a ride to the basketball game. So we went to the basketball game, and I sat next to Jeannie and talked to her the whole time, didn't pay any attention to the game. And I invited her to go to the after-school dance. There's always a dance in the Union after school. And so we went to the Union, and I was foreman or boss of a dishwashing room in a cafeteria that kids that didn't finish high school could come and get their degree.
Oh.
They got kicked out of high school for disobeying or so on. So they were older but wanted to get a degree, and so they could come to the college and get their high school degree.
Wow.
But they are the ones that would work there, but they hired me as a college student to supervise. And so they were all giving me a bad time my senior year, that I was a senior and not even married yet, you know, and I was kidding them, and I had a class ring, I'd always turn it around like a wedding ring. See, you know, and they weren't believing me. This was in January, 29th day of January. And so Jeannie went to the after school dance with me. Well, it so happens 2 of them were dancing together. And I said, well, you're a stranger on campus, can I dance over to them and introduce you as my wife? She agreed, so I did. Introduced her as my wife the first night I met her. So.
And what did your friends say?
They didn't say anything, they just danced on, you know. So, well, then I found out that she was going to take a bus to Sioux Falls and had a long wait over, then take a bus to Yankton to get back to school. So I said, well, I'll just take you to Sioux Falls and I'll be with you while we're waiting for the bus. So I drove her, and it had frozen overnight, and there's icy roads. It wasn't interstate, just 2-lane roads. But I took her to Sioux Falls, and at that time stores were closed on Sunday. And so we had about 2 or 3 hours to kill before our bus. So we window shopped down Main Street of Sioux Falls, went to the cathedral, thought the cathedral and everything, and just kill time until she had to board the bus.
What time was this at night?
Well, this was an afternoon. I guess the bus left about 5 o'clock or something.
Oh, so you met.
This was the next day.
Oh, this was the next day.
The
Okay.
next day.
Okay, I see.
But so happens Jeannie's cousin was an associate pastor, priest at there, and was our chaplain for our Newman Club.
Oh.
And so Jeannie checked me out with her cousin, who knew me very well, was from the Newman Club.
Oh, so she asked him about you.
Yeah.
And what did he say?
I guess he gave me a good recommendation.
He
So.
said he was a good guy.
So she was willing to go with me and have me take her to Sioux Falls. And then she was going to college in Yankton, and I wanted to see her every weekend. So I would skip band, which was the last class on Friday, to drive to Yankton. No interstates. It'd take me about close to 3 hours, I think.
Wow.
One way. And my grade in band went from an A to a C because as if you had graded on attendance. And I skipped every Friday then. And I'd pick her up and I'd either stay in Centerville at her home or go to Tyndall to my home.
Wow.
And I think I did that the rest of my senior year from January till I graduated.
So what did you do? Did you go out to eat, or did you just drive around or sit and talk?
Well, we went to the homes, her home or my home.
Oh, okay. And you visited with her parents?
Yeah, and I stayed there.
Plus I had to do my practicing. I practiced piano 3 hours a day.
Wow.
Even on those weekends when I.
And when she was practicing the weekend, I'd wash my car or something while she was practicing.
Wow. Did you also sit and listen to her practice?
Oh, sometimes I listen to her, so,
Wow.
but,
So how long did you date before you got engaged?
well, we got engaged. I met her in January, we got engaged in August.
Wow.
Because she had a year of college left in it. So I wanted her to have a diamond while she was her senior years. So other guys wouldn't pick her up. So I'd come down almost every weekend while she was in college, and she had to be in the dorm by 11 o'clock. So we'd be at either her house or my house in Tyndall, and then I'd take her to Yankton, drop her off, and drive back to Brookings, get there about 3 in the morning.
Oh, wow.
From Yankton, I'd leave her off at 11 when she had to go into the dorm.
Wow.
Get to Brookings about 3 in the morning, and I had to be at work at the foreman of the dishwashing room at 6.
So you didn't get a lot of sleep
I
that
didn't
year.
get very much sleep. And then I'd sleep during my classes. Fall asleep in class.
But that wasn't every day. You came every Friday?
Weekend, every Friday, and I'd come back Sunday night. You know.
Oh, okay, I see. So only one night a week you got 3 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
Wow. And then you got married the year after on June 25th?
Yeah, she graduated about June 4th or something, and got married June 25th.
Wow. And you got married, it was that same associate pastor who married you? Her cousin?
Well, he was a cousin. He came down to Centerville and was able to marry us. You know,
Wow. And you got married at the church there?
in Centerville, yes. A little white church. And for the reception, my mother furnished chicken. We went to the farm and butchered, I don't know, about 20 chickens or something,
Wow.
and made a casserole.
We had a chicken hot dish. For
Chicken
our
hot dish.
dinner.
And no air conditioning, and they had the church, I bet the basement was much bigger than our kitchen here, this whole kitchen.
Oh, I kind of remembered it's bigger than that, but then
Wasn't much bigger.
So did you decorate it? Who decorated it?
didn't do any decorating there.
Oh, I think there was a
Little
little
bit.
bit, mostly like on the tables.
Oh, right.
And crepe paper was a big deal then.
Okay.
And that was cheap. You didn't have to spend much money on it.
Oh.
And so everything we did had to be very economical because we just didn't have any money.
Yeah.
My parents didn't have money. Mother and I made my wedding dress.
Yeah, I know.
And we did, well, for that period of time, I think we spent, probably spent about $50
On the wedding?
on the material for my dress
Wow.
and the special, I don't remember.
Our wedding was well less than $1,000 for
Oh,
everything.
gosh,
Wow.
yeah.
So how many guests did you have?
Well, probably 50.
How many what?
Yes.
Oh, well, I have a record of that. I can't tell you offhand, but I have a book where I've got all that recorded.
Wow.
Well, when I graduated, normally I was worked for the summer for the agency, and I wanted to come with them. But I said the only reason I'd come with them is if I could work in South Dakota. Normally, it wouldn't put you in your home state.
Oh, why
Because I
not?
was going with Jeannie then, she was in college for a year. So they agreed to let me start in South Dakota, and that was in 1956. And in 1960, I worked as a statistician, junior statistician, and they wanted me to move to New York.
Wow.
And I turned them down. I said, no, I didn't want to. And then in 1960, they offered me the deputy job in Wyoming, which is unheard of. Usually you had to work in another state or another 2 states before you'd get to be a deputy. That'd be second in charge.
Wow.
But they offered me that job as second in charge of the office, and that's where we started to, as a pilot state for computers, and it was called accounting machines, but you'd wire boards for telling the computer or the machine what to do with data that was on a punch card. And I went to school for a summer in Denver learning how to wire those boards. Well, I liked it so well there, and I had all the responsibility of the reports. I built a new house. We was renting a house. And then I get a call from Washington after we lived in a new house maybe a year in 1963. And wanted me to come to Washington with a study group to develop what the agency's going to do with nationally with the computers, whether we centralize them or go to the states. And so I was on that task force for about 6 months, and they ran out of money, and we had to go get other jobs in the agency. So then went to what they called prices paid, and I was in charge of the price index for furniture, food, and clothing.
Wow.
For
What
the
did you?
nation.
Wow.
The price index. And I'd had that job for a couple of years, and then I got promotion to be the head cattle statistician in the livestock branch. And so I was in charge of all the reports related to cattle for the nation. And then I was there about a couple of years, and then I was offered to head up a whole section of cold storage, where I had about, I guess about a dozen employees and a secretary. Wow. And we'd do survey all the cold storage facility plants in the nation on their holdings on various items, you know. And from there, I got offered to head up the livestock branch, which was in charge of all the livestock, and got a promotion to be head of that. So I was head of that, and then the fellow in South Dakota was retiring, and I wanted to come back here and be in charge of the state office.
Oh,
And so I put my bid in for that, and it was about the 28th of May that I was at a meeting in Minneapolis, and my boss was at that meeting, was helping me the school for trainees, and he was out there, and there was another guy that wanted this job, and they called him up to his room, and I saw him go up there, and I thought, oh boy, he's going to get the job in South Dakota. Then he came back, and he says he wants to see you in his room, you know. And so he said, well, John, do you want South Dakota? I said, yes. He said, don't you have to check with Mama? I said, we talked about it, and she's okay with it. He said, okay. I said, when do I take charge? He said, in about 3 days. Get your butt out there. And so they paid for a trip for us to come out to find a place to live, and we found the house we bought on 31st Street, and went back and packed up our things and put our house on the market there, and moved here on Flag Day, the 14th of June, I guess.
wow.
So we had about 2 weeks to find a place to live and pack and move.
Wow.
And then I was in charge of the state, and I wanted to stay here as home, basically, and I told my bosses in Washington, forget about me, I don't want any promotions or transfers, I just want to stay here. I could have gotten an increase in salary and gone back to Washington, but I stayed as in charge of the state office for 25 years till I retired.
Wow.
I worked for the agency for 40 years.
Wow.
That's the only main job I ever had outside of summer jobs in high school and college, working on the farm for other farmers.
So you worked for the state your whole life?
For the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Wow, that's really cool.
Not many people have one job for 40 years.
No, that's true.
So,
Well, is there anything else you would like to say, Grandpa?
I think you covered quite a bit, so.
Okay. Well,
Good.
thank you for the interview. I'm going to ask you to say one more thing. Is there any advice or anything you would like to tell your future descendants?
Be true to yourself and be honest and work hard.